Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about two things. One, India is now officially the fourth biggest economy in the world. It has surpassed Japan. Last year, India surpassed Germany. So it's gone from being the sixth biggest economy in the last 3 years, surpassing Great Britain, then surpassing Japan to the third position. So, in fact, you could argue that India is well on its way to becoming the third biggest economy, probably within 2 years. But surprisingly, Germany's economy has done well this quarter, and so I think there will be a few months, if not a year's delay, in India catching up with Germany. So this is what I'm going to do in today's conversation. I'll speak for about 15 minutes. It is my suggestion to all of you who are listening to watch this, because I will show you, at least in the beginning, I'll be showing you some graphs and charts and some data so that it is easier to follow when you are watching the graphs and looking at them rather than just listening to me. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to you about the change in the global geo ranking of economies, and so we'll look at the top 10 economies, India's rise to the fourth position, and then I will talk to you a little bit about the decline of the Japanese economy, and then in the end, I will talk to you about what were the drivers of India's success. India's economy has grown at 6.7% in 2024-25. And so I will point out to what are the reasons why the Indian economy continues to remain the fastest growing economy among big countries. And I will also then point out to some of the challenges that the Indian economy will face in the 2025-26. So the current fiscal year has already started in April, and it'll end in March of 2026. And what are the challenges, which are not only short term but also enduring long term? I will talk about both of those challenges. So the first thing is, congratulations to everybody. India has just surpassed uh, Japan, and I'm going to show you some charts. If one of you is watching, can you please tell me if you are able to see this graph on your screen? I'm able to see it, so I feel as if I have seen this. So I just want to know if one of you could let me if know if you are seeing this uh, or not. Anyway, so what you see in this chart here is the top 10 economies in the world today, and they are United States at $30.5 trillion, followed by China, which is at $19.23 trillion, followed by Germany, which is at 4.74, then India at 4.19, and then you have Japan at 4.19. There's 1986, 198. It's basically 187 and 186. So India's GDP is up by, I think, $100 million so far. And then in the sixth place, you have UK, which is at 3.84. And then France and Italy and Canada. And then, of course, you have Brazil, which has joined the top 10 economies. These are not based on purchasing power parity. They have not been adjusted for that. If you adjust for that, India is already, I think, number three economy ahead of Germany and others. And China becomes number one, and US becomes either two or three. So but what is also interesting is that Brazil is also doing well. So if you look at the top 10 economies, you do have US, Germany, 1, 2, Japan, 3, UK, France, Italy, Canada. So all the G7 countries are there. And then the BIC of BRICS is here. So except South Africa and Russia, the original BRIC countries are not in the top 10 of the economies. But in this chart, you can also see the GDP per capita. Now, that is very shocking. If you look at the United States, the GDP per capita is $89,000. And China is $13,000, 13.69. China is on the verge of becoming a high income economy. The World Bank pegs it around $14,000. And then you see Germany at 55. And then India drops to 2.8 here. That is a stunning statistic that shows that on GDP per capita, India does not belong to this club of really rich countries, because if you look at Japan that India just surpassed, Japan is 33,000. So Japan is nearly 14, 15 times richer than India in per capita. Japan's population is one tenth or less than that. It's 125 million. India is 1.4 billion. And that's why you see this huge disparity. You again see UK and France and Italy, they're all above 40,000. So it's a bit sad that all Western countries are above 40,000 and none of the Eastern countries, Japan included, crossed 35,000. So Japan is the richest country. Of course, Singapore is very high at 156,000. And then there are these small countries like Qatar, etc., which are at 100,000. But in terms of big economies, the Japanese and the Brazilians and the non-Western countries, they remain reasonably poor. And you can see that Brazil is also pretty much down there at 9.96 thousand. So this is an upper middle income economy. Brazil, India is a lower middle income. China is just on the verge of becoming a high income economy, and Japan is the only high income economy, which is a non-Western country in this chart. So that is a point to remember when we talk about it. Clearly, because India is doing well on this particular metric of measuring economies, we obsess about it. India is the fourth biggest, and we will continue to talk about it probably next year or the year after when India surpasses Germany, and then I think we will stop talking about it after a little while. People will accept the fact that India is the third biggest economy, and then it'll. The projections of Goldman Sachs are that around 2075, India will become the second biggest. So probably it's going to take close to 50 years for India to go from being the third biggest to the second biggest economy. But you must realize that a lot can happen in 50 years. So we will leave that forecasting data. I also want to share this particular chart with you. It is very interesting. Uh, and in this chart, you will see that this is how the two countries compare as to how India rose and how Japan dropped. Uh, Noah, I will answer your questions in a bit, but right now let me explain this to you. So you can see how the Japanese economy has kind of went up and down, up and down, up and down in the past. From 2000 to 2025, I'm showing you the graphs. And India's has been steadily on the rise from 2000 all the way to 2024, except for 1 year where there was a steep decline as a result of COVID. India has shown a steady increase and growth. So India has always been growing, sometimes at under the UPA government, it was averaging about 18.5. Now it's averaging about 7. But it's still growing at a rapid pace. But if you look at Japan, and if you look at 2011, Japan was over $6 trillion in 2011. So just converting it to today's dollars, Japan should probably be around $7.5 trillion today, but it has gone down to 4. And then even in 2019, before COVID, Japan was over $5 trillion. So it has lost $1 trillion in its GDP. So there is a steady decline going on. So if you look from 2019 onwards, Japan's economy has shrunk significantly and steadily. So you can see the two comparisons here in just numbers. So if you look at Japan's GDP in 2019, it was 505.12 trillion. India was 2.84 trillion. So you could roughly say that Japan was twice the size of India's economy. It was little less than double India's size. And then within 6 years, India has overtaken Japan. But you look at Japan's GDP going down from 5 to 5.6, 5.06, 5.04, 4.26, another steep fall from 21 to 22, and then again fall, and again it's continuing to fall down. At this rate, Japan will be out of the top 10 economies within a few years. So it is very important for us to try and understand, and this is what I want to do in today's conversation. I want to talk about basically two things. So, one is to talk about India's growth, and the other is to talk about basically Japan's decline. And it's important for us to understand the reasons for Japan's decline, because the conditions are a bit peculiar to Japan. So not every other country is going to go through that. But Japan did everything right in the 70s and 80s. It invested heavily in its infrastructure. It became an export economy. It invested in technology and in innovation and good education. But I think Japan started enjoying the fruits of its development at the expense of continuing to develop. So it's like saying that you made profit, and then rather than reinvesting your profits, you started to enjoy your profits and start spending those profits. And that is where Japan got into trouble with its economy. So let's talk about a little bit of that before I then address your questions. So some of the reasons why Japan has declined, let me give you some numbers, which should be very scary. So Japan's growth since 1990, since the globalization began, from 1991 to 2003, it was grew only at 1.14%, while China was growing at 10% for during that entire decade, and India was also growing at 7 to 9% at that uh, in those decades. Japan was growing at only 1.14. So one of the astonishing findings for me, at least, who I don't watch Japan that closely, so I did a little bit of research for today's conversation. So to me, it was stunning that Japan has not benefited from globalization. Everybody, including the United States and Europe, have benefited except Japan. And that is so much. It is basically growing at half or less than half the pace of developed countries from 1991 to 2003. And then after that, Japan has been barely growing at 1% until 2010. And then from there, it has been declining. So if you look at 2010, Japan's per capita income was $44,000. It would have been one of the richest big economies in the world. But now it has gone to $33,000. And so it's just declining in just real numbers as well as an adjusted. So it's a 25% decrease in 15 years from 2010 till now. That is such a steady decline. It's like if it continues like that for another 10, 15 years, Japan will become a developing economy. That must be extremely shocking. On top of that, Japan's currency has been weakened, and which means that it cannot import stuff. So it complicated. It makes it easy to export, but it makes it very difficult to import. So there are some structural reasons why Japan has not done as well. One is demographics. Japan faces severe demographic crisis with a declining birth rate, an aging population, good health, good lifestyle is keeping people alive for longer. So what they're going to is that they have a huge social security burden. The welfare state has a huge burden because people continue to live into the 80s and they don't die. I think the life expectancy of Japan is close to 90 years. So people are just out there. If they retire even at the age of 70, they're living for close to 20 years and the state has to pay for that. And then people who can work, the workforce is decreasing. Well, one of the reasons for that is because Japan is fundamentally a racist country. It could address its labor problems by becoming a country that takes foreign immigration, but it is so hostile to foreigners, and it does not allow large migration into Japan like Europe and the US and Canada and others and Australia have done, which have grown reasonably well. So Japan can grow if it brings in foreign labor, but they don't want to do that. And so I think they would rather decline economically than uh, change culturally. I guess that is their choice. Plus, in order to support the high quality of welfare that it provides to its citizens, the government has been borrowing, and Japan's borrowing is stunning. Its GDP is $4 trillion, its total debt is $10 trillion. I talked about it yesterday. So its debt is 2.5 times, which means the cost of debt servicing and the burden on the budget is very severe. It does have a lot of foreign investments, from which I'm sure it draws a lot of revenues, but nevertheless, having such a huge public debt definitely raises the cost of investment, etc. Everything becomes very expensive. And they are also suffering from something called deflation. And so the consumption is down, people are not consuming as much, and the investments are also down. So Japan's economic outlook does not look very good. It has shown some resilience in some sectors, but broadly speaking, its economy is not as robust as it could be. And so I suspect that Japan will very soon be out of the top 10 economies in the world. Brazil is surely to catch up, while France and Britain might, survive and so forth. But other countries like Indonesia and Turkey, which are growing very fast again, will soon catch up and get ahead of Japan in the next 10 years. Let's look at India. What is helping India grow? And what is driving India's economic development? India has been growing steadily for the last 4 5 years. It has been the fastest growing major economy, and the previous 2 years, 2023 and 2024, India grew at 8% or 8.2%. This year, India's growth rate is 6.7%. So there is a decline, and it is quite possible that India is going to experience some challenges, primarily because the tariff issue and the economic uncertainty that Donald Trump's policies have brought to the global economy. So India, you can expect, will grow around 5.5 to 6.5% in that range in this year. It will remain the fastest growing economy, so it will definitely overtake Germany within maximum 2 to 3 years. But that does not mean anything very special because of the huge population that India has. That is why its GDP is so high at such a low GDP per capita. There are some enduring problems in the Indian economy which India will have to address going forward. And I'm going to just list four challenges that the Indian economy faces. One is unemployment and underemployment. So the youth unemployment is very high in India, it's 8.5%. And this is the kicker. For those who have education, in the sense people who have degrees, the unemployment rate is 30%, 29.1%. So only three, it's amazing. Only 7 out of 10 people with college education are getting jobs. So 30% unemployment. Whereas if you don't have a degree, then you have the unemployment for the young people is just 8.5%. So a lot of young people who are not going to go college are getting jobs. And then there's this issue of informal employment. So a lot of people are working in the informal sector, which means that they don't have social security, no healthcare, no retirement, nothing like that, working day to day. And besides that, there's another problem of unpaid employment. So India is the only country where you can be employed without pay, which means you're working on your father's shop or farm. Then there are a couple of other challenges that India faces because India's economy is, I will tell you shortly why it is doing well. And so you will understand why this problem is a problem, is household savings are on the decline. So people are borrowing a lot of money for consumption. And so the household debt in India is on the rise, which is quite a problem. Plus, private sector investments are not increasing at all in the last 10 years. And labor productivity in India is very low. Of all the G20 countries, Indian labor is the least productive of all. And that really hurts India's growth rates. If Indian labor was more skilled and more productive, then India would be growing faster than this. And the dream of becoming a Viksit Bharat by 2047 its chances would increase. As of now, India needs to grow around at 7.8 to 8% per year for the next 22 years to reach Viksit Bharat's goals by 1947. And it's this year it has averaged it has only 6.7% growth rate, and that is expected to fall next year, which means that the required rate of growth will go above 8%. But there are other things which are driving India's economy, which is the government expenditure and investments in infrastructure and capital expenditure, as it is called. So government capex is one of the reasons why India is doing well. The digitization of the economy is also another reason why India is doing well. You also can see that India is doing phenomenally well when it comes to domestic consumption, and that's where the household debt is increasing. People are borrowing money to spend. And one final thing that is also important is that India's exports have been growing significantly. In fact, I think the best indicator in the 2024 for India's economy would be the growth of its export sector, especially in IT services and business processes. So, in that sector, India is growing significantly. And India is also doing well in the agricultural sector, where nearly 60 million jobs have been created, uh, additional jobs in the past few years. So that's also going. And apparently, the monsoons are going to be very good this year. The rainfall is going to be better, and so that's going to be additionally advantageous to India's economic growth. So the agricultural products are going to be very good going forward. So I'm going to stop with that. That's the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to now look at your questions and answer them if I can. And of course, I don't need to remind you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, share the video with others, and super thanks and super chats are welcome. Okay, Saif, thank you very much for letting me know that you could see the charge. Noah, it does not make sense. India's domestic production is going down, and then how come it is becoming a large economy? So there are two or three things which are driving India's economic growth. One is government expenditure. So the more the government invests in, and you can see that by the rising debt of the government. So the government is now, India's debt is around 3.3 trillion or more. It's about 80% of the GDP, and it is rising. So the governments are borrowing and investing, both the federal government and the state government. They're investing in roads, they're building airports, they're building metros. So there's an infrastructure investment going on. The foreign direct investments have fallen. So there's a lot of roundabouting in the sense that Indian businesses are taking money abroad to Singapore and Mauritius and then reinvesting them back into India to avoid taxes. But the consumption is growing. So, like public private debt is increasing. So people are borrowing money to buy motorcycles, buy cars, buy televisions, laptops, iPhones. So those kind of things are going on. But you're right, Noah, the share of the manufacturing in India remains at less than 17% of the GDP, which means that the manufacturing is not increasing at the pace that the consumption is. So there must be lots of imports, and you can see that by the rise in Chinese imports from China, which is close to 100. The trade with China is close to 130, but most of it is 100 billion of it is imports from China, and that is part of the consumptions that people are indulging in. Uh, Japan is the oldest in the world. Yes, it's getting older and older, and the labor force is shrinking, so less people to work. And even those who work apparently have wonderful working hours. So it's great to be in Japan today, but they are spending their future. I think I won't be surprised that in the next 10 years, Japan will not be a very attractive country economically. It may have some money left over from the past few decades of growth, but it's not. It's like looking at the Japanese cars. I mean, right now, both the cars that we drive are Japanese, Nissan and Honda. I mean, they have very good cars. They have very high resale values, but they're not exciting. There's nothing cutting edge about them. They are safe cars. They are good cars. They perform well, but they're not as exciting, say, as Tesla or BYD, or even some of the newer models coming out from Germany, like Mercedes and BMW. So the Japanese are like that, I think. Will India seriously improve its industrial capacity to take place of China? Oh, I don't know that. In the last 3 years, Jim Passarotri, China has invested heavily in its market, in its manufacturing, uh, to such an extent that China now has 50% of the global manufacturing capacity. And because of the sudden growth in its manufacturing capacity, there's a lot of internal competition. So the Chinese businesses are working at very thin margins and bringing the cost down. So China is producing high quality stuff at very low prices, which has just shaken the Western world. In terms of manufacturing, nobody can compete with China, and that's why you see all the geopolitics. Let's not I mean, canceling of Chinese students visas to push China back technologically, imposing tariffs or limitations on quotas. Europeans are trying to ban EVs from Japan. They've imposed tariffs, etc., because they just for EVs from China. So basically, the world is not able to compete with China's manufacturing competence, volume, quality, and price on all those stuff. Can India compete with that? No. Like, India is getting the only good thing that's coming out of India right now is the iPhone thing, and Apple is investing heavily because of geopolitical reasons. And even there is most of the stuff is actually being assembled, manufactured elsewhere, but being assembled in India. And so India will have to invest more in manufacturing infrastructure of good quality, especially in terms of training and education. Apparently, Vietnam, and Mexico are doing a much better job of producing highly productive and skilled workers than India. So India may produce a lot of engineers and doctors, but they're not skilled people working on factory floors. So India's education system is not designed to do that. So it'll be a few years before India will be able to compete with them. Bajwa, India is 140th individual income, while Japan is among the top five countries. Very useless topic if it doesn't change the lifestyle of people. I agree with you, Bajwa, that if the country is becoming richer and richer, but it's not changing the quality of life, then you're right. There is a small percentage of Indians, maybe 1 or 2%, who enjoy quality of life, which is high first world kind. And then there are 5 to 10% of the population which enjoy like upper middle income quality life. Like, they live like the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Japanese. But the rest of the 80% of India, 85% of India lives like poor. Things are so bad that if you look at India internally, Bajwa, the northern Indian states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, and others, they are poorer than sub-Saharan Africa. So there's not much quality of life difference between, say, Afghanistan and Bihar. So you're right. So it doesn't matter that India adds another 500-600 billion dollars to its GDP and overtakes Germany. It's not going to make any difference in the quality of life of people. If you look at the Human Development Index, India is ranked over 130. And on many other quality of life, freedoms, etc., India lags far behind. There are still 80 crore people who get free ration from the government. Uh, South Korea is coming along. Yes, Saxena. Mahmood Ahmed, Japan economy is $5 billion quite high. India abhi bahut piche. No, not at all, Mahmood Ahmed. I don't know what data you are seeing, but India has overtaken. Japan's is 4,186 billion, to give you very precise last IMF World Bank data, and India is 4,187 billion. So India is up by $1 billion in the total GDP by the end of March. No, January to March. Yeah, this quarter. So You need to go back and see the $5,000 trillion as I showed was the 2012 or 19 data. In 2012, Japan was $6 trillion or 6,000 billions. Uh, yes, of course. Well, cars, the Chinese, Jimpa Satori, the Chinese are building great cars. Germans also produce great cars. Yeah, the Japanese are good in top there, but they are not very exciting, like I said. India is selling a lot of things. Most in India is exporting pharmaceuticals. India is exporting semiconductors. If you go and look at India's non-software, so India's total exports, Mohsin, are more than $1 trillion, of which over $700 billion are in manufactured things and 300 in IT services. So India's non-IT exports are more than double of India's IT exports. So I think you need to look at India's data before you make those comments. Uh, can't stop giving Bajwa. What is wrong information, Bajwa, here? Those are the data that is available. You are welcome to go and show me what data is wrong. Oh, yes, that's what I showed in my first chart, logos, that India's GDP has overtaken that of Japan, but Japan's per capita is over 33,000 and India's is only 2,800 or around about that. Let me look at what the chart that I was using shows. Yes, India's per capita is $282,880, whereas Japan's is $33,960. So yes, Japan is nearly 14, 15 times higher in per capita income. Uh, Rudra Prao, sir, will Apple investment in India? That's a very good question, Rudra. Apple has committed to moving its manufacturing to India. They want to export all iPhones that are bought in the US and make them in India. So all US iPhones will be made in India. All iPads and Apple laptops will be made, and the watches will be made in Vietnam. And by 2026, the goal is that about 100% of all exports to the US of iPhone comes from India. That was their goal, and that's why they were investing. But Trump is trying to create problems for Apple, is trying to force Apple, and is targeting Apple's investments in India. Trump could simply hurt Apple by just imposing in its bilateral trade agreement, like India doesn't want to reduce its tariffs on agriculture products because it wants to protect its farmers. So Trump could say, okay, you can keep the tariffs on agricultural products, but we will impose a 25% tariff or 30% tariffs. He'll make sure that it is more than the tariffs on China and say, okay, I'll impose 35% tariffs on semiconductors or just smartphones or just Apple. You can even limit it to that. And that itself will kill the entire plan that Apple has of exporting stuff. Because Apple thinks that US is going to impose tariffs on China. That is the reason why it's moving to India. But if tariffs from China for products from China is less than tariffs for products from India, then Apple will stay in China where it already has established factories and everybody there is already trained to do the work. So it all depends on Donald Trump's tariffs about Apple's investments in India. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to see if there are more questions or comments from you guys. Otherwise, I will take a break and I'll see you guys tomorrow at the same time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, New York time. And I want to talk a little bit about the changes that are taking place here in the U.S. and also about India's diplomatic adventures. India's economy logo says closer to Brazil or Indonesia, fast-growing emerging giants, not yet the advanced. Well, I'm not very sure logos about Brazil. Brazil's per capita GDP is 9.9. It's nearly 10,000. So it is 4 times more than India's. And I spent uh, in last December, I spent a lot of time in Brazil. My wife and we traveled through Brazil. I had a couple of lectures, and then we stayed back. And it was very interesting because I was able to fully understand the difference between a low income economy, low middle income, and high middle income economy by comparing the quality of life in Brazil and the quality of life in India. I had just come back from India. I spent a month in India, and then a few months later, I went to Brazil. And I can tell you this much, that the quality of life in Brazil across the board is much better than in India. Even though Brazil also has its pockets of extreme poverty, you can see in Sao Paulo and other places, lots of poor people, uh, like in, say, Dharavi in Mumbai and other places. There's also a lot of crime in Brazil. But overall, I found that the quality of life in Brazil is much better than that in India. And so you could say that Brazil is more developed than India. I have visited Indonesia many times, and Indonesia is like India. You are more or less correct. Not culturally also, but not Brazil. Brazil, India will take another 5, 6 years to be where Brazil is today if it continues to invest. But if only a small percentage of India's population benefits from India's growth, and a large number of them do not, then that's not going to happen. Why is India not opening up its economy in all sectors? A very good question. There are two things that India is trying to protect. Until recently, India was not opening up its Ashok Sahu Sahab. Until now, India was not opening up its services sector. So, for example, American insurance companies, American banks, etc., could not operate freely in India. I think the reason why India was doing that was it's protecting its domestic service industry by saying, well, why do we need Americans to give loans? We can do it ourselves, and so on and so forth. Why compete with foreigners who might just get business based on brand? Like you might want to do more business with Citibank rather than with State Bank of India. So they would not allow. You had to have less than 50% ownership. And so if you want to invest $1 billion, you had to find a local partner in India who is willing to spend more than half of it to be your partner. So that difficulty, those are the non-tariff barriers that Trump is complaining about. So India is planning to reduce that. So I think in life insurance, India has said, okay, now we'll open this area up. But for example, let us say if American universities open shop in India. So if I went to India for a few years and rented a large building and ran University of Delaware from there, then we could make a lot of money there. And India is preventing things like that. So that's one thing, because India thinks that we don't need bigger investments in technology and service. Our people can provide that. And the second thing is that India is trying to protect its agriculture and farming. So of the three sectors, which is manufacturing, agriculture, and services, India is protecting two of its sectors. And that is what is driving people mad. And even manufactured goods, India has the highest tariffs. Trump is right when he says India is the worst. So India's tariffs were higher than all other countries, much, much higher than even China's, or even Japan protects some sectors, but nobody came close to how high the tariffs in India were. And India is reducing them now. And so the model that India is promoting with the US is the trade agreement that it has with UK. Logos, despite rapid progress, India still faces big challenges like widespread poverty, poor infrastructure, bureaucratic hurdles. Yes, yes, India has a lot of problems related with its population. I agree with you, Logos. India has like a 15-year honeymoon period, because right now India's average age, I think, population age is around 40, 45. So it has a large working age population, which is not employed properly. Like I said, the unemployment rate among educated Indians, among educated youth, is 29.1%. So after 15, 16 years, all of these young people will be in their 60s. So India will then have the problem that Japan has now and China is having, which is an aging population, which then becomes a burden on the welfare state. So if India is going to have Labharti programs, it's going to have more and more for these older people. Plus, the formal sector is not growing. There's only informal sector, which means that there are no retirement benefits for people who have not had good jobs. Right now, those Indians who have jobs, government jobs, which give you pension, are doing much better. So apparently, people with mid-career level growth in public sector in India have pensions which are 50 to 70,000 rupees per month, which is more than what their son or daughter who has done an MS in computer science is making. So young people with advanced degrees with jobs are making less than their retired parents who had government positions, because right now the India's pension system is so good. Baja, thanks, Dr. Saab from Canada. Take care. Thank you all of you for watching. Oh, yes. I don't want to talk about that. India could have a massive domestic upheaval, and that could upset. It could get into a war with Pakistan, God forbid, or with China, God forbid that too. And those things can set you back significantly. Imagine a war that lasts 3 months, or like Russia and Ukraine goes on for 3 years. That will kill all manufacturing production project for both those countries. So yes, we are assuming that things will continue as they are at the moment, and then India could potentially, if it can step up a little bit by 1 or 2 more % growth, it can become a developed country in 25 years. Thank you for watching. I'm your host Muqtedar Khan. Take care. Bye.